Once they had been a proud and powerful species, feared and respected across the galaxy. Their advanced technology and vast fleets made them the masters of their corner of space. But that was before. Now, the Etherians drifted aimlessly through a dark, forgotten part of the universe, their ship barely held together as they fled from the galaxy's anger. Tava, the leader of the Etherians, stared out into the vast emptiness of space. Her sharp eyes watched the distant stars twinkle, but they brought her no comfort. The Etherians had once ruled this galaxy with pride, but now they were cast aside, seen as nothing more than a threat to the peace. Their past sins, their war against other civilizations, had left them with nothing. The galaxy had turned its back on them, refusing to offer them mercy or a second chance. "How did we fall so far?" Tava whispered, her voice soft but filled with a deep pain. The ship she commanded, the Sakthar, was drifting with no destination, its engines failing after years of disrepair. The crew was hungry, desperate, and exhausted. Many of the Etherians had lost hope. They spoke of finding a new home, a place where they could start again. But the truth was clear to all of them. No one in the galaxy wanted them anymore. They were exiles. As the ship floated silently, Tava thought back to the war that had destroyed everything they had built. The Etherians had fought with unmatched ferocity, seeking to conquer and expand their empire. But it was their own pride, their own belief in their superiority, that had led to their downfall. Their enemies had united against them, pushing the Etherians to the brink of extinction. Now, only a handful of their people remained, scattered across different ships and planets. Tava was one of the few still holding on to the dream of a brighter future, but she knew the odds were against them. The galaxy had already made up its mind. The Etherians were no longer welcome. "Captain," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was her second-in-command, Dara. "We've received another warning. The Coalition fleet is getting closer. They will not stop until they've wiped us out." Tava nodded solemnly. The warnings had been coming for weeks. The galaxy's coalition had made it clear that any ship identified as Etherian was to be destroyed on sight. There was no room for negotiation. There was no mercy. She looked at Dara, her expression unreadable. "Prepare the crew," she said quietly. "We need to get moving. We can't afford to wait any longer." As Dara left to carry out her orders, Tava sat back in her chair, staring at the stars once more. But this time, she wasn't just thinking about the past. In the back of her mind, a small spark of hope flickered. There had to be someone out there, someone who might help them, someone who could see past their mistakes and offer them the chance to start over. On Earth, Commander Elias Kane sat in his office, staring at the holographic display in front of him. The screen flickered with images of distant stars, starships, and strange symbols he didn't understand. But what caught his attention was the message flashing on the screen, a distress signal from deep space. At first, Kane had thought it was a mistake, a malfunction. But when his team checked the signal's origin, their eyes widened. The message came from an area of space that no one dared enter, a place far beyond human exploration. It was a strange, desperate plea for help, sent by someone or something in need. "Is this real?" Kane asked, his voice rough with surprise. He leaned forward in his chair, staring harder at the screen. The distress call was unlike any he had ever seen, but there was something haunting about it. "Yes, sir," said Lieutenant Thompson, his second-in-command, standing beside him. "It's coming from a ship, but the coordinates are unusual. It's from the outer rim, far beyond where we've mapped anything." Kane rubbed his chin. He had been in space long enough to know the risks of traveling into unknown regions. It could be a trap, or worse, a sign of something dangerous. Yet something about the message pulled at him. The tone was full of fear, an unmistakable cry for help. "We can't ignore this," Kane finally said, his voice firm. "Prepare the fleet. We're going in." The decision wasn't easy. The United Earth Federation had its hands full with local matters. There were debates about whether it was wise to risk their ships and soldiers for a single distress signal, especially one from such a mysterious and dangerous area. But Commander Kane wasn't the kind of leader to sit idly by. The message spoke to him. Something about it felt personal. He had always believed in helping those in need, no matter the cost. As the fleet prepared for departure, Kane spoke with the Federation's higher-ups. There were many who didn't agree with his decision, but the commander wasn't asking for permission. He knew what he had to do. Humanity's destiny was tied to something greater than politics. It was about compassion, and sometimes that meant taking risks. Hours later, the human fleet, led by Kane's flagship Phoenix, jumped into hyperspace, heading toward the unknown. The hum of the engines and the steady blinking of lights offered little comfort to the crew, who all knew they were about to enter a place where few had gone and fewer had returned. Kane stood on the bridge, watching as the stars blurred into streaks of light. He glanced at his crew. Each one of them shared his resolve. They knew the risks, but they also knew that they had a job to do. They were humanity's hope in the cold, dark reaches of space. "We don't know what we're walking into," Kane said, his voice calm yet determined. "But we're going to find out. And we're going to help whoever is out there. We owe them that." His crew nodded, ready for whatever awaited them. As they made their way toward the unknown, one thing was certain. Humanity was about to face a new chapter in its journey through the stars. And whatever they found, they would face it together. The human fleet entered the vast stretch of space where the distress signal had come from. The stars were distant and cold, and the silence in space felt heavier than ever. Commander Kane stood at the front of the Phoenix, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the vast, empty darkness outside. His mind raced with questions. What could they be walking into? What kind of ship would send out a signal from such a dangerous part of space? As they neared the coordinates, the crew prepared for what might lie ahead. The communications officer, Lieutenant Alvarez, spoke up. "Sir, we've detected the ship. It's a large vessel, but it's not moving. It seems to be in a state of disrepair." Kane nodded, his gaze steady. "What's the condition? Are they alive?" "We can't be sure, sir," Alvarez replied. "There's life support on board, but it's very weak. The ship is barely holding together." The atmosphere on the bridge grew tense. The unknown was always a dangerous place, but Kane wasn't about to leave anyone stranded out there. "We're going in. Prepare the boarding team," he ordered. The Phoenix carefully approached the Etherian ship, the Sakthar. Its massive hull was damaged, with large sections of the ship scorched and torn. It looked ancient, worn out from years of neglect. As the human ship docked, a small shudder ran through the Phoenix, and the air grew thick with anticipation. The boarding party, led by Kane, prepared to board the alien vessel. Their suits were equipped for all kinds of dangers, but the biggest threat they faced was the unknown. No one knew what to expect from the Etherians. Would they be hostile? Would they even be there? The airlock opened with a hiss, and the team stepped into the Sakthar. The inside was dark and silent, the flickering lights casting long shadows on the walls. It was eerily quiet. The Etherians hadn't sent any welcoming signals, and the emptiness of the ship felt unsettling. "Keep your weapons ready," Kane whispered to his team, his voice low but firm. They moved cautiously through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Finally, they'd reached the main control room. Inside, they found a small group of Etherians. They were weak, hungry, and exhausted, but they were alive. Their leader, a tall woman with pale skin and sharp features, stood at the front. Her eyes were full of caution and distrust, but there was also a flicker of hope that had been buried deep for too long. "Who are you?" the Etherian leader, Tava, asked, her voice shaky but strong. Kane stepped forward, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "We're here to help. My name is Elias Kane, and we received your distress signal. You're safe now." Tava's eyes searched his face for any sign of deception. For a moment, there was silence, Then she nodded slowly. Help, she repeated. No one helps the Etherians. Kane's heart sank at her words. The galaxy had abandoned them. He knew the story. Everyone knew the story. The Etherians were once powerful, feared across the stars for their strength and aggression. But now, they were exiles, shunned by the very beings they once ruled. We're not like them, Kane said, his voice steady. We believe in second chances. Tava stared at him, disbelief in her eyes. A second chance, she asked, almost to herself. Kane nodded. You're not alone anymore. You're safe with us. As the two species looked at each other, there was a moment of quiet understanding. Tava wasn't sure if she could trust these humans, but she knew they had no other choice. She had been running for so long, but perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something new. The Etherians had been brought aboard the Phoenix and were given medical attention immediately. Despite their war-torn appearance, the humans worked tirelessly to restore them. The crew of the Phoenix treated them with caution, but also with respect. Commander Kane knew that their mission was more than just saving lives. It was about building a fragile trust, and that trust was the only thing standing between peace and war. Tava sat quietly in a medical room aboard the Phoenix, her sharp eyes observing the humans who worked around her. She had always been a warrior, not accustomed to being the one to receive help. Yet here she was, vulnerable and uncertain. Her people had been rejected by the galaxy, and now they were relying on the kindness of strangers. It was hard to believe it was real. Commander Kane entered the room, his steps measured, but his presence firm. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting across from her. The conversation felt delicate, as though any wrong word could destroy the fragile connection they had begun to build. Tava hesitated, her lips tight. "I'm alive," she said, her voice quiet, almost too quiet. "That's all that matters." Kane nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You're safe now, but I have to ask, Tava, what exactly happened to your people? How did it come to this?" For a long moment, Tava said nothing. She stared at the floor, as though searching for the right words. Finally, she spoke. "We were once a proud species, as you know," she began. "We were powerful, too powerful. We fought wars, expanded our empire, and then we pushed too far. We attacked worlds that had no chance of defending themselves. We believed that the galaxy was ours to conquer. But the other species united against us. We were forced to flee, our people scattered and broken. No one would give us refuge. And now we have nothing." Kane listened intently, the weight of her story settling over him. He had heard the rumors about the Etherians, their rise and their fall, but hearing it from her own lips made it real. They had been feared, but their own arrogance had caused their undoing. "How many of you are left?" Kane asked softly. "Not many," Tava replied. "A handful, perhaps. We don't know if any others survived. The galaxy turned its back on us, and we've been running ever since." Kane sat back, thinking. "What now? What do you want from us?" Tava's eyes met his, full of uncertainty. "We need your help. We have nowhere to go, and no one else will take us in. But I understand if you can't. Our past is unforgivable." Kane felt a deep sadness for her, but also a sense of determination. "I don't know about the past, Tava, but right now, you and your people are here, and I can help you. We can help you rebuild, give you a chance to make things right. It won't be easy, and not everyone will accept it. But we're willing to try." Tava's eyes softened, though the doubt never fully left her gaze. She had heard promises before, only to be betrayed. Could she trust this human? Could she trust humanity? But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance her people needed. "I don't know if I can ever repay you for this," she said quietly. Kane offered a small smile. "You don't have to. Just rebuild. Make a better future." Tava looked at the humans around her, each one offering her care and compassion. It was something she hadn't known in a long time. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. The Phoenix hummed steadily as it sailed through space. The human crew had settled into a rhythm, and the Etherians were slowly adjusting to life aboard the ship. The healing process was long, and the wounds of their past couldn't be erased easily. But for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope. Commander Kane had given them a chance, and Tava and her people were determined to make the most of it. Tava stood on the observation deck, looking out into the vast expanse of space. The stars twinkled in the distance, so far and yet so close. She could feel the weight of her people's history pressing down on her, but she also felt the pull of something new, something different, something that felt like a future, not just survival. "Thinking about your people?" a voice asked, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Kane, standing behind her, his tone calm but friendly. Tava turned to face him. "Yes, I'm thinking about what comes next, what happens after we leave the past behind." Kane stepped closer, his expression serious. "That's something we both have to figure out. But first, I think you owe me a better answer. About what happened to your people." Tava's eyes narrowed, but she didn't turn away. She had known this moment would come. The humans were kind, but they weren't blind. They wanted the truth, and she was ready to give it, though it wasn't easy. "You deserve to know," she said quietly. For a moment, she hesitated, gathering her thoughts. The past was a painful thing to relive, but it was the only thing that could explain why her people had fallen so far. "We were not always like this," Tava began. "In the beginning, we were a peaceful species. We lived on a beautiful world, and our society was built on knowledge and exploration. But then we discovered weapons, powerful ones. At first, we used them to defend ourselves, but eventually we began to crave more. We wanted to expand, to control the galaxy. We believed we were the rightful rulers of the stars." Kane listened carefully, sensing the deep regret in her voice. "But you went too far." Tava nodded, her gaze distant. "Yes, we started wars, destroyed entire civilizations, and conquered planets that were no threat to us. The galaxy tried to stop us, but we wouldn't listen. We thought we were invincible, but we were wrong." Kane could hear the pain in her voice, and he understood. The Etherians had paid a heavy price for their ambition. "So what happened?" Tava's expression darkened. "The coalition of planets, the ones who feared us, formed an alliance. They fought back, using weapons we couldn't defeat. We lost everything. Our cities, our fleets, our people. And when the dust settled, the galaxy decided we were a danger. They exiled us. No one would help us. They wanted us gone." Kane's heart sank. He had heard bits and pieces of the Etherians' history, but hearing it from Tava herself made it real. She wasn't just the leader of an alien race. She was a survivor. Her people had been broken by their own mistakes, and now they were trying to rebuild from nothing. "We lost our home," Tava continued, her voice softer now. "We had to leave to run. We've been hiding ever since, always looking over our shoulders, always on the edge of extinction." Kane could see the weight of the past in her eyes. He knew that forgiving such a history wouldn't be easy for anyone, but he also knew that people could change, and sometimes the future depended on giving others a chance. "We're here now," Kane said quietly, "and you're not alone anymore." Tava didn't answer right away. She just stared out at the stars, as though searching for something in the vast emptiness. But this time, there was a small, quiet hope growing inside her. She had told her story, and though it was filled with mistakes, there was a chance to make things right. The Etherians had been exiled, but perhaps, with humanity's help, they could find a way back. The Phoenix cruised through space, its engines humming steadily as the crew focused on their tasks. Commander Kane stood on the bridge, looking out at the dark stretch of space ahead. Despite the hope they had brought the Etherians, there was still a looming uncertainty. Tava had shared her people's story, but the rest of the galaxy might not care about their past. The Etherians had made enemies, and those enemies might still be out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, the calm of space was broken by an alert. Lieutenant Alvarez's voice rang out, filled with tension. "Commander Kane, we've detected multiple ships approaching fast. They're from the Galactic Coalition. They found us." Kane's heart sank. He had known this day would come, but he had hoped for more time. The Coalition had made it clear that the Etherians were not to be allowed any mercy. They had been banished, and anyone who tried to help them would face the consequences. "How long until they reach us?" Kane asked, his voice calm but determined. "Less than an hour, sir," Alvarez replied, eyes fixed on the screen. "Their fleet is large and heavily armed." Kane clenched his fists, the weight of the situation settling over him. There was no time to waste. He turned to Tava, who stood nearby, looking equally concerned. She had feared this moment, the moment when the galaxy would not let them go unnoticed. She knew that the Coalition would come to finish what they started. "We have to prepare," Kane said firmly. "We can't outrun them, but we can fight back." Tava nodded, her expression resolute. She had known war before, but this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for her people's future. If they couldn't defend themselves now, they would be erased from existence. But she wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. The crew scrambled to prepare the ship for battle. The human fleet was outnumbered, but Kane knew they had one advantage. They had the element of surprise. The Coalition wouldn't expect a counterattack from the humans, and if they acted fast enough, they might have a chance. "We need to make sure the Etherians are safe," Kane said, turning back to Tava. "Get them to the lower decks. They're not fighters, but they can help in other ways." Tava nodded, her expression determined. She had never asked for help, but now she had to trust the humans. They were her people's only hope. As she turned to lead the Etherians to safety, Kane gave the order to ready the fleet for combat. "All ships, prepare for battle," Kane commanded. "We're not backing down. We fight for a future, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who believes in second chances." The bridge was filled with the sound of rushing footsteps as the crew moved into position. In the distance, the Coalition ships loomed closer, their weapons powering up. The tension was unbearable, but Kane remained calm. His crew depended on him to lead them through this fight. He couldn't afford to show fear. Not now, not when everything was on the line. "Steady," Kane muttered under his breath, his gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. "We're not just fighting for the Etherians. We're fighting for the chance to make things right." As the enemy ships approached, the Phoenix and its fleet prepared to face them head-on. The battle for the future of the Etherians, and for humanity's place in the galaxy, was about to begin. The Phoenix and its fleet prepared for battle as the Coalition ships drew closer. Tension hung thick in the air. Commander Kane stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the enemy vessels appearing on the screens. The fate of both the Etherians and humanity rested on the outcome of this battle. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he also knew that they couldn't back down. This was their moment to stand together and prove that humanity could make a difference. "Commander, we've made contact," Lieutenant Alvarez reported. "The Coalition has sent a message. They demand that we surrender and hand over the Etherians. They'll destroy us if we refuse." Kane's expression hardened. The message wasn't a surprise. The Coalition had made it clear from the start that the Etherians weren't to be allowed to survive. But Kane wouldn't give in to fear. "Reply to them," he said. "Tell them we won't surrender. Tell them we will fight to the end." The room was filled with the sounds of the crew preparing for combat. The weapons were charged, the shields raised, and the ships positioned for the battle ahead. Kane's crew was ready. The humans might be outnumbered, but they had one thing the Coalition didn't: hope. And that was enough to fuel their determination. Below decks, Tava and the other Etherians watched the preparations with quiet anxiety. They had never fought alongside humans before, and the weight of their people's history made this battle even more daunting. But Tava was ready. She had been a warrior before, and she would fight for her people's future. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Tava said, her voice firm as she addressed the group of Etherians gathered in the lower deck. "We're fighting for a second chance, a chance to rebuild, to prove we are more than the mistakes of our past." The Etherians nodded, their expressions filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they couldn't run anymore. This was their last chance to stand up, to fight for their future. As the battle began, the Phoenix and its fleet engaged the coalition ships in the darkness of space. The enemy ships fired first, their weapons lighting up the void as they aimed for the human fleet. But the humans were ready. Kane's ship dodged the incoming fire, weaving through the explosions and returning fire with precision. The Phoenix and its fleet fought back with everything they had, using their agility and tactics to keep the larger coalition ships off balance. The Etherians, though inexperienced in human technology, joined the fight. Tava had organized them into teams, helping where they could. They weren't soldiers, but they knew how to survive, and that gave them strength. Tava herself worked with the human crew to coordinate the defense, her knowledge of tactics proving invaluable. "Keep up the fire," Kane shouted, his voice booming across the comms. "We're not letting them take us without a fight." The battle raged on for hours. Despite being outnumbered, the humans and the Etherians fought with everything they had. There were losses on both sides, and the space around them was filled with flashes of light as the battle intensified. But the humans and Etherians fought side by side, united in a way neither species had imagined possible just days before. As the battle wore on, the coalition began to falter. They hadn't expected such fierce resistance. The humans, with their determination and courage, had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. And the Etherians, despite their past, had shown that they were willing to fight for something more than just survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the remaining coalition ships began to retreat. The humans and Etherians had won, but at a great cost. The Phoenix and its fleet were battered, but they had succeeded. They had fought together, against all odds, and emerged victorious. Kane stood on the bridge, staring out at the damaged coalition ships drifting away. He didn't feel the thrill of victory. Instead, there was a quiet sense of relief. They had done it. They had shown the galaxy that humanity and the Etherians could unite, that they could fight for a better future. The Phoenix drifted through space, its hull scarred from the battle. The coalition had retreated, but the cost of victory was clear. The fleet was battered, and many of the crew members had been injured. But despite the damage, there was a sense of relief among the humans and the Etherians. They had survived. They had stood together and fought against impossible odds, and they had won. Commander Kane stood on the bridge, looking at the damaged ships in the distance. His mind was focused on the future. They had won this battle, but there was no telling what would come next. Would the galaxy accept them? Would they ever be freed from the fear of retaliation? As he stood deep in thought, Lieutenant Alvarez's voice broke through. "Commander, we've received a new signal. It's coming from deep within the nebula. The source is unknown." Kane turned, his eyes narrowing with concern. "What's the nature of the signal?" "It's strange, sir," Alvarez replied. "It's not a distress signal, but it's urgent. We believe it's coming from a hidden fleet. Something's out there." Kane's gut twisted. They had just fought off the coalition, but now there was something else, something more dangerous. "Get us closer to the signal. We need to find out what's happening." The Phoenix changed course, heading toward the source of the mysterious signal. As they neared the edge of the nebula, the crew felt the familiar hum of the ship as it pushed forward. But something was different. There was a growing sense of unease, as though something was watching them. Tava stood beside Kane, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. She had fought many battles in her life, but this felt different. There was an unfamiliar energy in the air, a sense of danger that she couldn't explain. The Etherians had survived many attacks. But this felt like something far worse. "I've never seen anything like this," Tava said, her voice tense. "It's like we're being pulled toward something alive." Kane glanced at her, his expression tight. "Whatever it is, we're going to face it head-on. We can't afford to back down now." As they entered the nebula, the signal grew stronger. The darkness of space around them seemed to grow colder, and the stars flickered out of view. The Phoenix moved cautiously, its sensors scanning every inch of the area. And then they saw it. Emerging from the depths of the nebula, a massive ship appeared on their radar. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The ship's design was alien, ancient, and beautiful, with strange symbols carved into its surface. But there was something else, something sinister. The ship was enormous, easily dwarfing the Phoenix and its fleet. The crew gasped as the ship's shadow stretched across the stars, and Kane's heart raced. "What is that?" he whispered. "It's not from the Coalition," Tava said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is something else, something ancient. I've heard stories, but I thought they were just legends." Kane turned to her, his face filled with uncertainty. "What kind of legends?" Tava's eyes were wide with fear. "The legends speak of an ancient race, the Varin. They were said to be the original rulers of this galaxy, but they disappeared long ago. Some say they still exist, hidden in the dark corners of space, waiting for the right moment to return." Kane felt a chill run down his spine. The Varin, an ancient and powerful race, said to have been lost to time. Were they real? And if they were, what did they want? The Varin ship slowly moved closer, its massive form casting an ominous shadow over the Phoenix and its fleet. The crew watched in silence, unsure of what would happen next. Would this new enemy offer peace, or would they bring destruction? Kane's mind raced. This was a new threat, one far beyond anything they had ever imagined. But no matter what, he knew that humanity and the Etherians had already proven one thing. Together, they could face any challenge. "We're not backing down," Kane said firmly, his voice filled with determination. "Prepare for contact. We'll figure this out together." The massive Varin ship loomed before the Phoenix, its dark silhouette blocking out the stars. The air on the bridge was thick with tension. The crew stood frozen, eyes wide with disbelief, unsure of what to expect from the ancient alien vessel that had just appeared from the depths of the nebula. Commander Kane felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The battle with the Coalition had been hard enough, but now they were facing something entirely different. The Varin ship was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was ancient, massive, and filled with an unsettling energy. "Commander," Lieutenant Alvarez said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty, "we've been trying to hail them, but there's no response. It's as if they don't want to communicate." Kane stood in silence for a moment, his mind racing. The Varin were just a legend, stories told in whispers across the galaxy. They were said to be an ancient race, powerful and elusive, but no one had ever proven their existence. And now, here they were, right in front of them. "What do we do now?" Tava asked, her voice tight with anxiety. The Etherians had fought many battles, but this was something different. This was an unknown enemy, one that could very well decide their fate. Kane turned to her, his expression resolute. "We don't have a choice. We need to find out what they want. We can't afford to ignore them." Tava nodded slowly, understanding the weight of his words. The Etherians had been exiled, running for so long, and now they were in a position to prove they could change. But this was a chance to show that not just humanity, but all of them could make the future they wanted. Kane signaled to his crew to prepare for any kind of response. He wasn't sure whether the Varin would be friends or foes, but he knew they couldn't stand by and do nothing. If they were going to survive, they would need to face this challenge head-on. Then, without warning, A strange signal pierced the silence. It was faint at first, but growing stronger with each passing moment. The ship seemed to hum with energy as the Varan vessel finally responded. "Commander, they're speaking," Alvarez said in disbelief. "It's a transmission." The words that came through the speakers were not in any language the humans or Etherians had ever heard. It was an ancient, complex series of tones and patterns that seemed to carry a weight of centuries within them. "Can you translate it?" Kane asked, his voice calm but urgent. Alvarez worked quickly, typing commands into the console. After a few tense moments, the translation appeared on the screen. The message was simple but chilling. "You have brought the exile to our doorstep. The time has come to choose." The crew stared at the words, unsure of their meaning. What choice were the Varans speaking of? Were they threatening them, or was there something more? Tava stepped forward, her voice low. "The Varan. They were once the rulers of this galaxy. They were betrayed by the very species they ruled, and in their anger, they vanished. This could be their test." Kane's heart pounded in his chest. "A test? What do they want from us?" "We must prove our worth," Tava said softly. "They will not accept weakness. But if we show them we are different, they may offer us a chance." Kane clenched his fists. The Etherians, despite their dark history, were offering their people a chance to prove they were more than just their past. But now, humanity had a chance to stand beside them, to show the Varan that they had come to help, not to conquer. The transmission continued, this time more urgent. "Choose. You are either with us or against us." Kane took a deep breath. It was a choice they could not ignore. The future of both humans and Etherians rested on this moment. "We're not backing down," he said firmly, his voice unwavering. "We will prove we're worthy of a second chance." As the Varan ship inched closer, the crew of the Phoenix stood united. They were ready. They had already fought for their survival, and now they would fight for their future. The galaxy would learn that humanity and the Etherians were not to be underestimated. The massive Varan ship hovered just outside the reach of the Phoenix, its shadow casting a dark veil across the stars. The transmission had ended, leaving the crew in a heavy silence. The choice was clear. Either they would stand with the Varan and prove their worth, or they would become enemies in the eyes of one of the most ancient and powerful races in the galaxy. Commander Kane stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the screen. The crew was waiting for his command, and though he could feel the weight of their gazes, his mind was made up. This was more than just about survival. It was about what humanity stood for. They had fought for the Etherians, helped them escape the darkness of their past, and now they had to fight to prove they were worthy of the future they sought. "We've come too far to back down now," Kane said, his voice steady, but with the quiet strength that made his crew trust him. "We'll show them who we are, and what we stand for." Tava stood beside him, her face full of determination. She had spent her life fighting, always on the run, always hiding from the consequences of her people's mistakes. But now, with the humans at her side, she had a chance to finally stand tall, to prove the Etherians were capable of more than war and destruction. This was their chance at redemption, and she wouldn't let it slip away. The Varan ship sent another signal, this time clearer than before. The ancient tones seemed to vibrate in the air, filling the bridge with a strange, almost overwhelming presence. But this time, it was followed by a single phrase, direct and sharp. "Show us your strength." Kane turned to his crew, giving them one final look before he gave the order. "Prepare for whatever comes next. Let's show them what we're made of." The crew of the Phoenix quickly sprang into action. The ship's weapons were ready, and the shields were powered up. They weren't sure what kind of test the Varan had in mind, but they were ready to face it. The Etherians, too, were prepared. They had not been fighters for so long, but they had learned quickly, and now they stood shoulder to shoulder with the humans. Suddenly, the Varan ship activated a strange energy field that surrounded the Phoenix, and for a moment, everything went still. It was as if time itself had frozen. The crew held their breath, unsure of what was happening. Then, a flash of light erupted from the Varian ship. It was blinding, a pure burst of energy that shot toward them. But before the blast could reach the Phoenix, the ship's shields flared to life, absorbing the energy. The ship shook violently, but the crew held firm. Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "Activate the countermeasures," he shouted. The crew worked quickly, launching energy pulses back toward the Varian ship. The battle was intense, but it was not a fight of destruction. It was a test, a challenge to prove their strength. The Phoenix weaved through the energy blasts, evading the Varian's attacks, while returning fire with precision. Every move was calculated, every shot intentional. Tava watched from the communication station, her eyes focused. She had never imagined that she would fight side by side with humans, but now it felt natural. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a fight for everything they had ever dreamed of. For a new beginning. Minutes later, the Varian ship finally stopped firing. The massive vessel floated silently in space, its presence now less menacing. The transmission came through again, this time with a single, final message. "You have passed the test." Kane exhaled, his heart still racing. "What now?" he asked, turning to Tava. Tava's face softened with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Now we have the chance to rebuild. The Varian will allow us to live, to grow, to change." The message from the Varian was clear. They had been tested, and they had succeeded. But this victory wasn't just about defeating an enemy. It was about proving that humanity and the Etherians could unite, that they could overcome their pasts and build something better together. Kane looked out at the stars, the weight of the moment settling in. They had won a battle, yes, but more importantly, they had earned a future. The Phoenix had sailed through darkness, and now it was ready to sail toward the light. "We've earned our second chance," Kane said, his voice full of hope. "Now, let's make the most of it." And with that, humanity and the Etherians stood at the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where the past would no longer define them, and the future was theirs to shape.